Hello everybody. Today we are going to move on to lesson 21.2. So we're going to solve some more equations by factoring. We're going to work on factoring for several lessons here. But the difference today is the problems that we're going to factor are actually going to have a number in front of the x squared. They're going to have a number in the a position. So that's the difference today. So we're going to continue using the box method that we learned the other day. We're just going to build on it a little bit to make us account for that A in the front. So homework with this lesson will be on 788 to 789, 2 through 16 even, 17 and 22. So I'm going to go ahead and we're going to flip directly to where the extra notes go for lesson 21.2 because the problems down here are a great kind of review, but we want to jump to the new stuff for today. So I'm going to give you some time to kind of set your paper up. Okay, we're going to do several examples, but there's some steps that you're going to want to have down as reference. So if you kind of want to save room on the left side for an example and put the steps right here in this corner, I'll zoom in on the steps and you guys can take as long as you need to get that down before moving on. I'm just going to read through them as you guys are kind of writing that down. First up is that when you look at your problem that's initially down in the book, you've got to rewrite it in standard form. Okay, so in other words, you have to make it equal 0. So you got to kind of think you can't factor anything, you can't use the box method, you can't do any of that unless you make the equation equal 0 first. So that has to happen. Okay, second thing you're going to have to look for today is you're going to have to factor out any common factors or leading negative signs that all three terms may share. So if you look at an equation and your A, your B, and your C can all be divided by a common factor, you're going to need to pull that factor out before you can attempt to make the box. So I'll show you how to do that on a couple problems in a minute. If there's a negative sign in the front, we're going to factor that out as well because you don't want that leading negative sign inside the box as you're trying to factor. So from that point, once we get it equaling 0 and factor out any common factors or negative signs, then we are going to factor it into those two sets of parentheses using the box method. So here's a breakdown of the box. The upper left-hand corner will always have the ax squared term written in it. The lower right-hand corner will always have the c term written in it. And then this is definitely different than the previous lesson. You're going to multiply a times c and kind of get a new target number, and you're going to use factors of that number that add to b. So we'll show it with examples and it makes it easier, but this way you've got it written down somewhere. And then you're going to write the common factor of each row and column outside of the box, and then finally you'll solve it. So pause if needed as long as necessary for everybody to get that down, and then we're going to go to examples. Okay, example number 1. 6x squared plus 28x minus 2 equals 2x minus 10. Okay, so if you look at your first step, it says we have to rewrite that and make it equal 0. So here's the deal. Okay, we're going to move this 2x over here and this negative 10 over here. So the 6x squared is going to remain a 6x squared. But if I do 28x minus 2x, this is going to become 26x. And if I do negative 2 plus 10, this is going to become a positive 8. And now it equals 0. So I moved everything from the right side over to the left side and made it equal 0. Okay? Now this is that perfect example of what I was talking about. You need to check for common factors. If you see that 6, 26, and 8 can all be divided by a common factor, you have to pull it out of there. You have to factor it out. 6, 26, and 8 can all be divided by 2. So I need you to pull a 2 in front, and then you go through and divide everything by 2 and put what's left. 6x squared divided by 2 is 3x squared. 26x divided by 2 is 13x, and 8 divided by 2 is 4, equals 0. So all I've done is pull the 2 out. You can see that if I distributed the 2 back in there, if I like remultiplied that, I would go back to the previous line of work. But I want to pull the 2 out. Okay, now you make the box. So you make it equal 0, you factor out the common factors, and then you make the box. So let's get everything in the right position. Okay, this 2 is factored out. It is not part of the box. You use what's in your parentheses. The 3x squared goes in the top left, and the 4 goes in the bottom right. Okay, so here's where this is very different than yesterday. Okay, because there was a number in front of your x squared, because there's an a term, you are not trying to find numbers that multiply to 4 and add to 13. You have to first multiply the a times the c, 3 times 4, and write 12 out here. This is your new target number. I need numbers that will multiply to 12 and add to 13. So that's going to be 12 times 1. Okay, and now I go through and I write my common factors of each row in each column. So I'm going to go up and down these. 3x squared and 1x. The only thing they could both be divided by is x. Okay, but 12x and 4 could both be divided by 4. Same way, if this was a positive number that you wrote that against, you make a positive sign. So like because that 12 is positive, then that's a plus sign. Okay, go across. These 3x squared and 12x, okay, they can both be divided by 3, and they both have an x. So 3x is their common factor. Right here, 1x and 4, that's where sometimes people get confused. They're like, they don't share anything. Anything can be divided by 1. So if you can't find anything else in common, the common factor is 1. Okay, and then you go with the box that you wrote that 1 next to, you look and see if that's a positive number, it's a plus sign. So your factors are 2 times 3x plus 1 times x plus 4 equals 0. That is our factored form. Okay, now again, when we go to solve this, that 2 is not going to mean anything because if 2 times this equals 0, the 2 doesn't equal 0, but one of these sets of parentheses has to. So we're going to solve this one. If we made 3x plus 1 equals 0, I'm going to get 3x equals negative 1, and if I divide by 3, I get x equals negative 1/3. And if I make the x plus 4 equals 0, I'm going to get negative 4. So my solutions are negative 1/3 and negative 4. Let's try it again. Negative 5x squared plus 8x minus 4. Okay, that does not equal 0. Move that 4 over. So it's going to say negative 5x squared plus 8x plus 4 equals 0. So now we're in standard form. Okay, 5, 8, and 4 don't have, they can't all three be divided by a common factor. So we don't have the common factor, but what we do have is a leading negative sign. If that happens, I need you to factor the negative sign out and then basically change all the signs in here. Make this a positive 5x squared minus an 8x minus a 4 equals 0. That negative sign will affect what goes in your box, so you don't want it attached to the 5. So pull it outside, which means just change all the signs. See, if I distributed that negative sign back in there, I'd go back to what I had on the previous line. So now I do the box. 5x squared goes in the top left. Negative 4 goes in the bottom right. And if there's a number in front of a squared, you got to get used to doing a times c is negative 20. That's your new target number. I need numbers that will multiply to negative 20 and add to negative 8. And remember that if you find yourself getting stuck, just start writing down. Well, you could do 1 times 20. Is there any way you can get an 8 out of that? No. You could do 2 times 10, right? Okay, so look, 2 times 10. If you wanted to get negative 8, you would need to make the 10 a negative. So you need a negative 10 and you need a positive 2. And then I'm going to go through and I'm going to write my common factors. 5x squared and 2x can be divided by x. Negative 10x and negative 4x, or negative 4, sorry. Okay, those can both be divided by 2. Now you decide the sign, since you put that 2 next to a box that had a negative number in it, that's how you know to put a minus sign. And then across, 5x squared and 10x could both be divided by 5 and x. 2x and negative 4 could both be divided by 2. If you put that 2 next to a box with a positive number, you put a plus sign. Okay, one thing that people get to the point where they struggle on today, because there's new numbers in the box, is they're not sure if they put the right factors on the outside. Just a quick double check, this is kind of cool. When you multiply the numbers on the outside of your box, it should equal the numbers inside the box. Like, look, 5x times x is 5x squared. 5x times negative 2 is negative 10x. 2 times x is 2x. 2 times negative 2 is negative 4. So it's a good way to self-check and see if you ended up with the right numbers on the outside. Okay, so keep in mind that's a pretty cool trick to know. All right, so my factors are negative sign, and then 5x plus 2, and x minus 2 equals 0. All right, so that negative sign has no effect on my answers. My answers are what would be in these two sets of parentheses. So either that 5x plus 2 equals 0. So if I solve that, I'm going to get 5x equals negative 2, divide by 5. So I can get x equals negative 2/5 as one possible answer. Or my other one is just going to be x equals 2. Okay. All right. Moving on, example 3. 8x plus 7 times x plus 1 equals 9. So at first I was like, awesome, this is great. They already have it factored for us. I love the parentheses. But then I realized it doesn't equal 0. Okay, so when that happens, you have to move that 9 over, but you can't move the 9 over and just like stick it on the end of those parentheses. So this is like the example we did in the last lesson, where unfortunately you got to do a few more steps here. You're going to have to FOIL this out to get it out of parentheses, and then move the 9 over, and then we can factor it correctly. So I'm going to do FOIL real quick. 8x times x is 8x squared. 8x times 1 is 8x. 7 times x is 7x. And 7 times 1 is 7. Okay, so I'm going to do a couple steps in one here. The 8x squared stays. I'm going to combine 8x plus 7x would make 15x. And then I'm going to go ahead and fix this. If I have 7 and I move this 9 over here, 7 minus 9 is going to be negative 2. And then I equal 0. Okay, now check. Can 8, 15, and 2 be divided by a common factor? No. So you go straight to the box. So inside the box, 8x squared goes in the top left, and negative 2 goes in the bottom right. If there's a number in front of x squared, you do a times c is negative 16, and that's your new target number. You need numbers that will multiply to negative 16 and add to 15. Okay, so what that needs to be is a positive 16 and a negative 1, right? 16 times negative 1 would be negative 16, but it would add to 15. Okay, common factors. 8x squared and negative 1x share an x. 16x, negative 2. They can both be divided by 2. If this is a positive that you put the number against, this is a positive. 8x squared and 16x squared can both be divided by 8 and x. Negative 1x and negative 2 can both be divided by 1. If that's a negative, you put a negative. And again, self-check. Look, 8x times 8x, or 8x times x, 8x squared. 8x times 2, 16x. X times negative 1, negative 1x. 2 times negative 1, negative 2. Works out beautifully. All right, so let's get our answers. Your factors are 8x minus 1 times x plus 2 equals negative 16. So we're going to solve those. Or sorry, equals 0. I'm losing my mind. Sorry about the negative 16. I went way out of character there. Sorry. Okay, so if you make the 8x minus 1 equals 0, you're going to have 8x equals 1, divide by 8, and you're going to get 1/8. Or negative 2. All right, so let's go to a word problem real quick, and then we should be set. We are going to do a word problem using the falling object model off of page 787. So you're going to need this formula right here. It's going to be used in all of these problems today. H equals negative 16t squared plus vt plus s. Okay, so quick reminders. H means ending height. Okay, S means start height. And then this is a new one. Okay, V is going to stand for velocity in these problems. Okay, and then I'm also going to put a little note for you. Downward throw is negative. So if you read a problem today about someone that is throwing something downward, then their velocity is going to be a negative number. So get that down and then take a look at page 787, number 8. We're going to read this together and then we'll do that one. Okay, it says, how long does it take a rock to hit the ground if thrown off the edge of a 72-foot tall building with an upward velocity of 24 feet per second? Okay, so let's put that into where it belongs on this problem. Okay, so it says how long does it take the rock to hit the ground? So your end height is 0. The negative 16t squared is always negative 16t squared. And they said an upward velocity of 24 feet per second. So that's how you know to put 24 here, and it's positive because it's upward. If they'd said downward, it would be negative. And then your start height is, they said you're throwing it off of a 72-foot building. So it starts 72 feet up in the air. Okay? So now we're going to use what we've learned today to solve it. It already equals 0. Do negative 16, 24, and 72 share any common factors? Yes, they can all be divided by 8. And we're going to take care of this negative sign while we're at it. So we're not only going to factor out an 8, we're going to factor out a negative 8 so that there's not a leading negative sign in my polynomial. So if I divided by negative 8, this would turn into 2t squared. If I divided the middle term by negative 8, it would turn into negative 3t. And if I divided 72 by negative 8, it would turn into negative 9. So the negative 8 plays no role in my box. In the box, we're going to put the 2t squared and the negative 9. And then we're going to multiply a times c. Our new target number is negative 18. I need numbers that will multiply to negative 18. They need to add to negative 3. Okay? So if you think about that for a second, why don't we try negative 6 times 3? Negative 6 times 3 is negative 18, but negative 6 plus 3 is negative 3. All right, let's get your common factors. 2t squared and 3t can only be divided by t. Okay, negative 6t and negative 9, those can both be divided by 3. But since that's a negative, you put a minus there. Okay, 2t squared and 6t can be divided by 2 and t. 3t and negative 9 can be divided by 3. Since that's a positive 3, you put a plus sign. Look, if you check it, 2t times t, or 2t squared. 2t times negative 3, negative 6t. 3 times t is 3t. 3 times negative 3 is negative 9. So our factors should be good. We have this right here. 0 equals negative 8 times 2t plus 3 times t minus 3. So the negative 8 is not going to be one of my answers. If I make 2t plus 3 equals 0, I'm going to get 2t equals negative 3. And if I divide by 2, I'm going to get negative 3 over 2. And for this one, I'm going to get t equals 3. So again, go back to the question. The question is, how long does it take the rock to hit the ground? 3 seconds is a reasonable answer. Negative 3 over 2 seconds, Not reasonable. So be realistic when you're answering your questions, and you should be totally fine on your word problems as long as you use this falling object model and plug everything in correctly. So, biggest things to remember: must make it equal 0 in standard form before you start, must pull out any leading negative signs or common factors. The box is your best friend. Use it carefully. Self-check yourself on your factors to make sure you haven't done anything silly. And you should be good at factoring. Enjoy lesson 21.2.